few every year, and the king of Russia would make sure they were done properly. And he was a hell of a god, really. And so he stands for death in the Tarot of the Gods. He's in the Major Arcana. And there's been a strange synchronicity with creating these cards, because as I was doing the text of the card of Perun, Russia invaded Ukraine. It actually happened exactly that week. I'm not joking. It's like I was invoking the chap. I apologise for that. It wasn't my intention. He was the primal deity of Russia and other Slavic peoples. His name means the origin, the first, the most high. He's also in old Baltic mythology, where he's called Perkunas. And he's the god of thunder, sky, lightning, storms, rain, law, war, but also fertility and oak trees. So I think we've got to realise these gods are sort of projections by the people, reflecting their collective intelligence at any given evolution of their tribal stages. Bohemians called him Peranu. Bulgarians called him Perusan. Estonians, Piker. Latvians, Perkons. Lithuanians, Poles. Prussians, Slovenians, they all had the same god. Serbians. The Slovenians had Perun, same name. And I discovered when I was in the Balkans one time, I was talking to a Croatian lady, who's actually Slovenian, but she lives in Croatia. They have a festival in Croatia every year dedicated to Perun. Like New Age people have brought this back, and they don't do any sacrifices, but they put up a tree and they dance and they have music, and it's a way of celebrating the ancient rituals and myths. So it's interesting that when the early Slavs began to become Christian, they would want to swear oaths by Perun. And Vladimir the Great, who converted Christianity in Kiev, he had a shrine of Perun established way up in the north in Novgorod. And it's part of a World Heritage Site. So he was a Christian when he was in Kiev. He was a pagan up in Novgorod. And archaeologists have discovered this.
What time, roughly?
It was founded, Novgorod, about 850 AD by wandering Viking traders. They called it Holmgard. And then the Slavs sort of gradually took over, and they introduced Perun worship. Probably, Perun and Odin seem quite similar, so the Vikings would have accepted Perun. Stravinsky knew about the traditions of sacrifice, and his famous work, The Rite of Spring, is about the sacrifice of a maiden every spring to Perun. And in fact, we know that Vladimir the Great, who later became a Christian, did sometimes do sacrifices. He chose a Viking in Kiev to become a living sacrifice to Perun. And Vladimir had built great statues of the gods outside his palace in Kiev when it was a pagan palace. And he felt they deserved some victims. So, we've got to go quite a long way back to thinking about this sort of way of looking at stuff. I have a very naughty question, because in Britain now we've just sanctioned state-assisted killing for people that are facing the end of life, terminal. They've only got 6 months to live, they're in pain. They can now be medically assisted to die. That's like state sacrifice, almost. And there are other countries that do this. Canada, Switzerland, Belgium, I think. What's the difference between that? If I get to a really ripe old age and I'm terribly ill and I'm dying of something, I think I'd rather go out in a sort of on the top of a hill with fireworks going and lying on an altar and being like a human sacrifice, like in full Technicolor and wow and music and Stravinsky, going back to the home of the gods, than dying in some crummy hospital with someone just giving me an injection. I mean, to me, it shows more fidelity to the gods to actually go out in, like, I have no fear, I'm going back to the home of the gods. Let some of my druid friends, cut the knife. Maybe that's how these pagans thought about human sacrifice. I don't know. What I wouldn't be in favour of is killing young virgins or people that have got a life ahead of them. But the oldies, I can't see the difference between that and medically assisted dying. That's just a question to discuss philosophically. I'm against, you can't be against death because it's part of life. So why not go out with a bang and a concert and fireworks and a performance and have 20 young virgins wearing white dancing around the bier and all that? I could be the first pagan sacrifice of the 3rd millennium, Anyway, I don't think I would be sacrificed. Well, if I have to be sacrificed to Perun to stop the war, fine, you can do it. But give me another 20 years to finish my works. He was worshipped in Poland. He has 3 heads. He was seen as often wooden statues which have 3 heads looking out in all directions, because Perun is regarded as the one that can see everything and everywhere. And Vladimir in 988 turned his back on Perun and the rest of the Slavic pantheon because he'd sent envoys throughout the world to assess firsthand the major religions of the time: Islam, Roman Catholicism, Judaism, and Byzantine Orthodoxy. They went to Byzantium and they were most impressed with what they saw in Constantinople. They came home and said, "We knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth. We knew only that God dwells there among the people, and their service is fairer than the ceremonies of other nations." Wow. And after carefully weighing this, that's why Vladimir decided to go for Byzantine Orthodoxy. I'm not quite sure that's a strong enough reason, but hey, aesthetics are a part of the story. And then when he converted, he destroyed all the Perun statues and other Slavic deities. But the worship of Perun lived on in the hearts of the Slavs. And there are nowadays, revisionist groups in the woods around Russia and Moscow that are doing Perun rituals. And some of them may stupidly be Russian nationalists who think attacking Ukraine is somehow the will of Perun. I don't believe it is. You see, Perun's wife was Mokosh, a fertility goddess, and she's a variant of Mati Zemlya, the earth goddess. And all that wonderful Perun energy should be going into loving his consort and the earth and making life, a wonderful experience for the children, for the families. And so, if Perun worshippers now, who follow Rodnovery, which is a new religious movement in Russia, there are at least about 2,000 of them, if they're now saying that no, Perun wants the destruction of all the Ukrainians, I think I'd love to have a theological debate with them, because I don't think it's true. What they did do is they built a statue of Perun in a park near Kupchino in St. Petersburg. And it remained in place until 2007, when it was taken down by the authorities. I bet there's a story behind all that. Interesting. So, there are big issues to do with Perun, and let's hope that we can get some interfaith dialogue going, because I know pagans in Ukraine, in other Slavonic regions, and I studied Slavonic history in my degree, and I know the chap in Slovenia who's the head of the Pagan Association in Slovenia. The Slavs never stopped worshipping their original gods, but they never worshipped them as killers. They revere strength and defence, but that's to defend life, to defend the women and children, to defend the community. but not to go out and kill the others for no reason at all, which is what... I mean, Putin has created all this false, fabricated information as an explanation for why he has to invade, and I just think that that's against Perun, actually, and he will pay a penalty and a price. Okay, that's enough. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, now we come to another one that actually is a very good balance to it. And this is the Eight of Air, whose very similar name called Pehar, P-E-H-A-R, and is one of my favourite of all the gods. I mean, I love them all, of course. But if I had to spend a whole night in the yurt, I'd be happy to go off and spend it chatting to priests of Pehar. He is a Bon deity in Tibet, the highest landmass in the world, where a lot of wisdom lives. And the Bonpo had a tradition there before Buddhism came. So Pehar was one of the original deities, the most important Bon deity in Tibet, and he's associated with the element of space, and that's why he's the Eight of Air. And Bon, as we know it, was founded by Shenrab Miwoche, who was believed to have reached complete enlightenment, and the Bon believe that Pehar, the god, inhabits the highest mountain ranges of Tibet. You can see him. You can talk to him. A friend of mine worked closely with Doug Scott, who was the first Englishman up Mount Everest. He's dead now, sadly, but I wonder if he managed to talk to Pehar on the way up. Very possibly. What we do know, and this is really interesting, one of my heroes, Padmasambhava, the great Tibetan Buddhist teacher, who came from Nalanda University, where I've been, he brought Buddhism of a tantric variety to Tibet. Tibetans aren't just any old Buddhists, they're very profound, magical practitioners of Tantra. And Padmasambhava had a contest with a Bon priest. And the deal was they had to fly up to the top of the mountain. Like in a race, they had best out of three. And they both were down at the bottom and then to fly up. And each time Padmasambhava won. He got there first. And the Bonpo said, look, what's going on here, man? How can you do these tricks? I thought I was good, but you're crazy. What do you want? And Padmasambhava said, we want to make a peace treaty. We don't want you to stop worshipping your gods. I just met Pehar on the way up. I love him, he's great. These are your traditional gods, and his consort and all the others. But we want them to be protectors of the Dharma, because the Dharma is eternal. It applies to gods and men and women, and animals, and everything. It applies to all worlds. It's the eternal truth and the eternal law of non-violence, non-judgment, spiritual enlightenment. We want them to realise what a great gift it is I'm bringing here. So I want Pehar to become a protector of the most secret, sacred practices of Tibetan Buddhism. And the Bonpos agreed. So Pehar then was adopted into Tibetan Buddhism, and he became the protector of the oracles of Tibet. The oracles are very important. They were shamanic practitioners who the Dalai Lama, or initially the kings, would consult in moments of national crisis. And it was thought they channeled directly stuff from Pehar. I've researched this matter, and the oracle was consulted by the current Dalai Lama on a couple of weeks before he fled Lhasa when the Chinese invaded. Should I go? Should I stay? And no, they told him, you've got to go. What I can't work out is whether he took the oracle with him, because it was a really difficult passage. They had to go in secret across snowy mountains and stuff, and the fewer people that knew who was escaping, the better. I don't know if the oracle got out, and I don't know if there's currently an oracle in Dharamsala, which I visited. I didn't I didn't ask that question. I met his senior director at Tibet House in Delhi. We had a Christmas meal together, but I didn't ask him about that. He would know if anyone does. So now this to me is like a very important peace treaty between the pagans and the revealed religions. And that would be lovely if Perun had been adopted by the Christians as the Dharma protector for its teachings. I think Christ would have preferred that if they converted, as it were, Perun to the path of peace and love, and didn't chop all his statues down, which is rather rude, but revisioned them as, protectors of spiritual teachings. I think that's what we did in the Celtic world with the Druids. They accepted Christ and allowed their gods to kind of be Christianized. So in a local church here, Toussaint Croix, in the church there's a stone of Loup, who was one of the most important deities of Gaul, the god of light, gave his name to Leon. And he's there in the church, he's there in the foundation of the church. It was obviously pre-Christian, but they used it to build the church. That to me is a sensible druidical way of dealing with this stuff. Christ was not coming to destroy Druidry, he was coming to augment it and refine it a bit, like actually abolishing actual human sacrifice, for instance, and all the other stuff that was maybe going on in some circles. It's interesting also, in Tibetan art, Piha has 3 faces, just like Perun, right? And he's seen as riding a lion, and he has 6 arms. So, he's quite a god, actually. Yes, so you can read about him in more depth in my text that goes with the tarot card. He's a fascinating god. Some scholars say he may have been originally Uyghur in origin, the Yidam of the Hor tribal people. The Uyghurs are interesting. They provided the alphabet for the Mongols, and they later a lot of them became Manichaeans, which was a juicy esoteric thing that got them all going. And later they became Muslims. And now the Chinese Communist Party doesn't know what to do with them. I would say, study the tarot of the gods. Let's all make peace treaties between these deities, which are, from a Jungian perspective, they're all just the archetypes from the collective unconscious of each different tribe or linguistic group. And none of them are a threat to anyone. We have to perfect them all and reach what's called Dzogchen, which means great perfection or great completion. And Piha plays a very important role in Dzogchen, which is Ati Yoga, the utmost yoga. This is when you reach a state of purity and emptiness and spontaneity, luminous clarity and compassion. And so Dzogchen, which is practiced by Tibetan Tantric Buddhists, is also practiced by Bonpos. And Piha is the underpinner of all this, which is interesting. The height of Dzogchen practice is to attain Rigpa, which means knowledge. And there's a centre in London where I used to go, the Rigpa Centre, which was a nice Tibetan Buddhist centre near when I lived in Islington. And that's why I'm so interested in being and knowledge. We have to synchronise being and knowledge and get them working and pulling in the same direction. Because at the moment they're all over the place and fighting each other, like my knowledge is better than yours and all that, and fighting wars. That's childish. You're not even in the philosophy club if you say that. So anyway, Piha we love him, and it's strangely interesting that Perun and he have turned up today. Okay, any questions?
Just the last word you said, you propose that knowledge are competing, and I have a doubt. There is something else, because if knowledge are competing, they make debate, and nowadays it seems that there is no debate. There is some other strengths acting than knowledge. Just a remark
Sure,
as
sure. No, I mean, I agree. It's more like propaganda
yes,
being pumped out,
yeah.
which is, we're right, we're true, we're right.
We don't care about the words. The propaganda is used for the gallery, but deeply, it seems that there is another problem.
Well, precisely. We've fallen away from realising how important knowledge is. And I mean, yeah, one of the problems is this idea that all knowledge is relativistic. There's no truth, it's just what you believe, what you think. So my knowledge is as good as anyone, and therefore I'm not even going to discuss with you. Why should I listen to you? My knowledge is good. And, whilst there's truth in that position, with maturity one realises one can learn from others, and one can augment one's own knowledge by listening to others in debate,
Especially in conflicts, because in that case, when you have conflicts, you must change your mind to understand.
That's why I've been running Philosophers for Peace. I thought it was easy, we'd get there. When we got peace in 1990 with Moscow and the Cold War seemed to be over, I thought we were home and dry, but sadly there were people in St. Petersburg driving a taxi that didn't have that view. Putin believed that, no, that was all wrong, that peace thing. It's reclaiming the former Soviet Union glory, and let's do it by force and violence in Crimea, the Caucasus, and now full frontal attack on Ukraine. He's like an incarnation of a Perun warrior. Probably Vladimir the Great come back saying, well, I would actually, and I'm not joking, if I was going to mediate between people like Zelensky and Putin, and they agreed to come to a French mediation centre like Rambouillet or somewhere, the first week they'd have intensive past life regressions with experts, and we'd discover who they've been in their past lives, and they would discover for the first time using hypnotherapy. And only after that was done, and they'd had beautiful chill-out aromatherapy massage, and half a day in the jacuzzi, so they're totally chilled and transformed. Then we bring them face to face, and we ask their souls, which have lived many lifetimes, often as warriors or whatever, to now make peace, to re-script the narrative in imaginative and new ways that can make peace. Anyway, that I think is, I've been trying to do that, but I've written to both Zelensky and Putin offering this kind of thing, and they never write back. So anyway, one keeps on, all right? So thank you, and go well this week, all right? Let's leave it there, because philosophy waits for no man. Yes.